Hello, it's Silver. This is Mega City Police. So this is a retro wave themed sort of roguelite. So we're talking a game with the pacing of something similar to Nuclear Throne, and its overall gameplay style is in that sort of area. But it's got this retro wave aesthetic, and a lot of it is based around like neon-soaked 80s ultra-violent like cop movies and things like that. So we've got characters like RoboCop and Judge Dredd and Sarah Connor and some other characters like that from that sort of era, that 80s era of like action hero ultra-violent silliness. Well, I say we've got them in this game. I mean, we've got characters clearly based off of them. They aren't actually them. Akin to something like Broforce, kind of. It's in that very much like 80s pastiche sort of idea where everything is over the top and silly. I think there's even like a Mr. T-themed character going on in here too. So you've got all of that. And in addition to its art style, which is very nice, by the way, it's got this very chunky pixel art style, but it's got a lot of environmental detail and things, especially in levels like Japantown, that really drive home the whole retro wave aesthetic. It does a good job of presenting it in this sort of neon-soaked visual style, but also, in addition to all that, you've got the music. And unfortunately, I can't really show you any of that really good music because a lot of it's copyrighted. So you won't be hearing any of it in the background. There's also music original to the game. That's actually what you're going to be hearing because I don't want YouTube to send someone to my house to bust my kneecaps. But regardless of all that, the music in this game is very good. Both the original stuff and the copyrighted stuff, it all has a good place in the whole like retro wave aesthetic and really helps to bring it together. So the music is great. And the other big thing to note about this game is that this game is really, really hard. It's extremely difficult. I've actually only managed to get to the end twice out of all the runs I've made so far. And considering how many of these games I've played, I'd like to think I'm at least relatively passable at them. So I've got to say I think this one is definitely way up there in terms of difficulty, harder than something like Nuclear Throne or Into the Gungeon. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that the time to kill in this game is extremely short. Both for you and for the enemies, pretty much everyone dies really fast. Even the bosses go down pretty fast. A successful run of this game will probably take you around 15 to 20 minutes tops. So this is a very fast, frantic game, although funnily enough, despite how fast everything is, you as a character are not all that fast. Your movement speed is relatively slow, and you have a defensive move that is usually like a dash or a shield or something. It depends on the character that you're playing, but it's on a relatively long cooldown. So despite how frantic the actual gameplay is, your movement doesn't really match that, which I think is part of why it's so difficult. And I think the other big reason that it's so difficult is that time to kill being so short means that you don't get a grace period after you get hit. In something like Gungeon or a lot of other examples of the genre, when you take damage, you have just a brief second where you're flashing or something and you can't take any more damage. But this game does not do that. If like 3 enemies hit you with overlapping attacks all at the same time, all of them will hit you at the same time and you'll probably just die on the spot. So the game actually has a couple of different forms of difficulty selection, which is interesting. You have a singular difficulty that you select every time you start a run, and it's dependent on the police cruiser you climb into. You start with just the normal difficulty when active, but you'll also unlock like a hard one after you beat that, and so on. But completely separate from the difficulty that you select there's also a different selection that's called Casual or Classic, and this doesn't make a massive difference in my experience, but it is a slight difference. Basically, the big difference is in classic mode, the enemies drop money and ammo and stuff, and after a few seconds they'll disappear, so you have to rush over and collect them if you can before they disappear, whereas in casual mode they don't. They stay there until you collect them. In the description for casual mode, it also says that health kits are a little bit more common and enemies do a bit less damage, but to be honest, I barely notice a difference at all because no matter which mode you select, health is extremely rare and damage is extremely high, so it doesn't really seem to make that much of a difference. And you'll start off by choosing a character, and you'll only have really the one to start with, but as you go through the various levels and start beating areas and stuff, you'll get access to more different characters to choose from, and the characters have a couple of basic stats, namely their maximum health as well as their walk speed and how much stamina they have, which is useful for meleeing. You can melee at any time. Meleeing actually does destroy bullets, although you can only melee a couple of times before you run out of stamina, depending on the character you're playing, and it only destroys bullets in a very small cone in front of you, and it's got quite a bit of a delay to it, so it's not as powerful as it sounds. Every character will also have a defensive ability that they can use. This is something like a dodge, although not all characters have a dodge. It might be a shield that converts bullets into energy for energy weapons. It could be a teleport that actually allows you to teleport back wherever you want after a couple seconds, things like that. And they also have an offensive skill of some kind that is charged up by doing damage. Once it's charged up, you can use it, and these are usually quite powerful. The basic character starts with a flashbang that actually stuns all enemies on screen at once for a little bit, which is really useful. And other characters can have all sorts of them, like summoning an airstrike, or summoning some drones to fight for you, or actually calling in some extra police members to come and fight for you, and things like that. Every character will also have a single starting weapon. It's basic, but it'll do the job for a while, and also once you beat a run with them, you'll unlock a second starting weapon that they can start with both at the same time, because everyone generally starts with 2 weapon slots, although this can change, and I believe you can have up to 5 depending on what happens during a run. And once you start, the name of the game here is very much resource conservation. You are starved of resources in this game, deliberately so. The maximum amount of ammo you can hold for every ammo type is actually pretty low. Some of them might look like a lot, like your energy ammo, that's one that looks like a lightning bolt, can hold something like 600, but that's not as much as it sounds, because all energy weapons actually use multiple ammo per shot. So something like an energy rifle might have about 75 shots total at absolutely max ammo. So you're trying to place your shots very carefully in this game, and always collect ammo as much as you can from enemies that drop them, and from chests. Every room will have at least 1 chest in it, sometimes 2 or 3. A chest will have a gun that you can choose to pick up if you want to, as well as it'll give you some ammo of whatever type the gun it drops is. There are loads of different guns in this game, not quite Gungeon levels, but still a lot of different ones, and they have all sorts of different characteristics, and of course they each use a different ammo type. So unlike something like Gungeon, or even something like Nuclear Throne, which I feel this is a lot more inspired by, you are finding guns pretty often. Since every single room will have at least 1 chest in it, that means every room will have 1 gun minimum. And sometimes enemies can drop them, sometimes random chests or blown up cars can drop them and stuff like that too. So there are a lot of weapons to find in this game, and I think despite the fact that you can only hold 2 by default, the reason the game gives you so many is because of this resource starvation that it puts you through, because you may have a gun that you really, really like, but have like no ammo for it, and you may find, say, a shotgun and you have maxed out shotgun ammo. You may want to keep the one you've got, but it doesn't really matter how good it is if you can't shoot it, because you don't have any ammo for it. So you're going to be switching your loadout pretty often in this game just based on what you currently have ammo for. You know, you may have a legendary rarity super powerful gun, but if you just consistently find no ammo for it, it's basically a wasted slot because you can't use it. So you are definitely encouraged to swap around very often, and I think this is why the game drops so many weapons on you so often. For me at least, definitely the high point of the game is the weapon variety. You have all sorts of really fun stuff. Even the basic ballistic weapons are still very satisfying to use because of this very short time to kill and quite high accuracy for your weapons. This means that the game is about frantically pointing and clicking as fast as you can, as accurately as you can, to conserve ammo and also place your shots very carefully, because each placed shot is going to do a lot of damage, and most enemies can only stand up to a few of them. I'm a big fan of some of the slug thrower weapons, which are just very powerful single shot weapons that are super accurate but don't fire very fast, and also of the plasma weapons, which use as radiation ammo, a sort of nuclear symbol, but it's one of the rarer ammo types, but they are very strong and oftentimes can pierce enemies and things like that. And I like the fact that a lot of the enemies have specific death animations for the kind of damage that they're actually killed with. So, ballistic ammo will just leave a body, but lasers may actually disintegrate them entirely and turn them into ash, and all of the ammo types have something like this, which is a cute little touch. And this combines with the really nice environmental aspects of the game, where there's a lot of stuff in the arenas for you to fight around. Pillars, cars that can explode, vending machines that can fire out cans all over the place when you break them. There's just a lot of environmental interactivity that makes the combat feel very dynamic in this game, which is what you're looking for, right? Because if we're doing the whole 80s action hero thing, that's how those movies were. Whenever a firefight happens, everything explodes and tons of stuff flies everywhere. That's what you want from this sort of over-the-top retro wave aesthetic, and the game definitely delivers on that. I mentioned that one run is pretty short in this game, and the way that it works is you will start in a particular area, and each area is done in the same order every time, and they also have their own environments and types of enemies that you'll face only there and stuff like that, so each area feels unique from the last. And each area is 3 rooms long. The first 2 rooms will be just full of enemies in general. Sometimes they'll have an event like a prison break or something happening, but for the most part they're just rooms full of things to kill. And then the third room will be the boss fight, which will have a ton of enemies in it, as well as the boss itself, sometimes multiple multiple bosses, depending on the area that you're in, all the way up until the final area, the HQ of the mega corporation, which takes place, the first 2 levels take place in a parking garage sort of area, which is large, but also densely packed with a lot of explosive cars and things. So you've got to take care to not blow yourself up in that one, and you're also facing off against some pretty heavily armored enemies with lots of laser attacks and projectiles that move very fast and stuff. And then the final boss of the run is actually on the rooftop of the Mega Corporation HQ, which is a big, giant mech thing that has a very huge health gauge, although still dies pretty fast because that's just the nature of the game. And during this final boss fight, you are given, mercifully, 1 crate of each of the ammo types you're carrying, so that you have at least a bit of a refill for whatever guns you bring up there, but you don't get any other drops during the fight. You don't get any other ammo drops, and there are 0 health drops. So the amount of health you go into the final fight with is what you got. That's all you get. There are no health crates or med kits dropped by the boss during phase changes or anything like that. It is all one continuous fight that you have to get through without getting murderlated. And then if you're able to succeed and beat that final boss, you'll get a nice view of a very 80s sunset sort of cyberpunk skyline. It looks really awesome. Some really nice music, and the credits roll, at which point you will start back at the police HQ and unlock some characters if you haven't unlocked them all already, and unlock the next difficulty up. This means the game is actually relatively simple, kind of bite-sized entertainment, while also still not being a casual game at all. It is bite-sized, but it is very hard. And it's also a game where you don't really unlock all that much. You know, most of the weapons, I think pretty much all of the weapons except for the starters, are unlocked from the start, and you just have to find them. The only main thing you're unlocking are the characters. This means there's not a lot of an unlock treadmill, which is, I mean, it's a good and a bad thing, right? It's a good thing because you get most of the content right from the start, but it's a bad thing because some people they play roguelites for the meta progression, for the unlocks, for the incremental increases to your strength. And this game doesn't really do that. You know, you don't put points into stats or anything. You don't unlock new guns or unlock new areas to go. It's pretty much all there from the start. The only thing you're unlocking are the characters to start with. So of course, whether or not that's for you is going to depend on what sort of player you are. For me personally, I don't mind a more bite-sized experience having most of its content unlocked from the start, because that's kind of, for me at least, the point of a smaller, quicker experience like this, is to not have a lot of that stuff that's a barrier to more content variety, and instead have all the content variety pretty much there from the beginning. So I don't actually mind that. But as for you, if you're a fan of stuff like Enter the Gungeon or Nuclear Throne or a little bit of Hotline Miami, because this game does have a very immensely fast time to kill, kind of like Hotline Miami. It's not quite that fast, but it's pretty close. So if you're a fan of games like that, then this might be one to check out. It's got a really nice aesthetic, it's got some fantastic music, some really cool weapon variety, and some very nicely designed levels that have a lot of environmental interactivity and stuff that make them feel, you know, detailed and authentic. And but just be aware that it is very hard. It is a game that's extremely challenging, and they do have a pretty good sort of content addition plan going forward. This is not an early access game, it is content complete, but they do plan on adding more to it, which is always nice to see. And I'm excited to see what the additions bring, because I think there's a lot of room for some more unlocks or some increased variety for characters and weapons, and especially places to go and bosses to face and things. So we'll see how all that shakes out. I'll probably update you later on when that stuff is actually in, but I'm sure it'll be a little bit before all that is complete. So I'll put the link in the description below this video to the Steam store page so that you can go and check this game out yourself. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.